I'm Rachel Brenner, 27 years old, and the last thing I remember before everything went dark was clutching my chest and trying to whisper for help. No one could hear. I was alone in my apartment, fighting to breathe, my skin burning, my vision dimming. My parents had been called hours earlier, but they never came because Lily was walking her dog. I had always known. I came second to my sister, but that night made it permanent. By the time they read my letter, everything between us had already changed. Before I go any further, drop a comment telling me where you're listening from, and hit that like and subscribe button if you've ever felt like a background character in your own family. I grew up in the kind of neighborhood that made it into postcards, tree-lined streets, trimmed hedges and porches with wind chimes that tinkled in the summer breeze. Our house sat on a quiet cul-de-sac in central Pennsylvania, a modest two-story with green shutters and a white fence that needed repainting every other spring. From the outside, we looked like the picture of a close-knit American family. Inside, though, it was always clear who mattered more. I was the firstborn, the one who made straight A's, cleaned up after myself, and asked for little. Lily came along 3 years later and seemed to take up all the oxygen in the house from the moment she arrived. Our parents, Frank and Linda, believed in hard work appearances and structure, at least when it came to me. For Lily, things bent and stretched. When I was 7, I came home with a first-place ribbon from the science fair and waited for the kind of reaction I had seen other kids get. Cheers, fridge magnets, even a trip for ice cream. Instead, my mom glanced at it, said, "Good job, honey," and turned back to help Lily take off her helmet after learning to ride a bike. I told myself it was understandable. Riding a bike was a big deal. That excuse would become the first of many. By the time I hit middle school, I had learned not to expect much. If Lily got a B- in art, there'd be applause at dinner. If I brought home perfect report cards, my dad would nod once and ask me to clear the table. They weren't cruel, just distracted, always caught up in whatever Lily needed, wanted, or felt. She was cheerful, messy, and wildly emotional in ways that seemed to draw them in. I was neat, quiet, and steady, which I think made it easier for them to forget I was there. Then came the diagnosis when I was 16. My body started turning against itself. A battery of tests confirmed an autoimmune condition, the kind that flares under stress and reacts badly to certain foods, strong scents, and worst of all, animals. I had to start carrying an inhaler, taking daily meds, and avoiding places like pet stores or friends' homes with dogs. My parents never said it aloud, but their sighs and eye rolls made it clear that my illness was more of a scheduling nuisance than a medical crisis. If I missed school for a doctor's appointment, my mom would complain about rescheduling her lunch plans. If I had a reaction, my dad would grumble about insurance deductibles as we waited in urgent care. Even so, I kept trying to win them over. I joined swim team, worked part-time jobs, graduated with honors. I went to college on scholarships and finished top of my class, while Lily dropped out after one semester because the workload was too overwhelming. That Christmas, they gave her a brand new SUV and told me they were proud of how self-sufficient I was. After college, I got a job at a marketing firm in the city, just under an hour from where I grew up. I rented a small apartment, started building a life, and told myself I was okay. I visited on holidays, brought thoughtful gifts, smiled through being ignored. I even kept in touch with Lily, who still lived at home, bouncing from part-time jobs and Instagram side hustles, while my parents praised her for trying. It wasn't until Lily brought home a dog, a $3,000 purebred Samoyed named Scout, that the line was truly crossed. They knew I couldn't be around animal dander. I reminded them. I begged. But they smiled and said, "Lily really needs this dog for her mental health." They built a special room for him, complete with a cooling unit and handmade furniture. When I said I wouldn't be able to visit anymore, my mother told me I could just take some extra pills so I wouldn't ruin Lily's happiness. Still, I went back one more time. They invited me for dinner. My mother said she'd make my favorite lasagna with garlic bread, and my dad promised to pick up that cheesecake from the downtown bakery. I let myself believe just for a moment that maybe something had changed. That maybe they had noticed my absence, felt my distance. I bought a bottle of wine and a new dress and told myself to expect nothing. But the moment I stepped into that house and heard Scout barking from the den, I felt the tightness in my chest before I even crossed the threshold. I stood in the doorway for a few seconds, letting the cold air cling to my skin, while Scout barked from the den like I was a stranger. The scent of lasagna filled the house, warm and familiar, but my chest already felt tight. My mom came over to hug me, still wearing her apron, and said something about the cheesecake being in the fridge. I asked quietly if the dog was staying the night, and she looked surprised, like the question hadn't occurred to her. "Of course he's here," she said, like it was the most natural thing in the world. "Lily brought him this morning. She's staying through Sunday." I followed her inside, already regretting the drive. I could feel the beginnings of a reaction crawling along my arms, a faint itch behind my ears, and a dryness in my throat that no glass of water could fix. I tried again. "Mom, I told you last time I can't be around Scout for more than a few minutes. Even with medication, it's dangerous." She waved it off, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. "You'll be fine for a few hours. Don't be so sensitive. Lily would be heartbroken if we made him stay outside." My dad stepped in, then cheerful as ever, clapping his hands once before pulling me in for a side hug. "Hey, kiddo, dinner's ready in 10. Come get comfortable." I glanced toward the den where Scout had quieted down and tried to breathe through my nose. I didn't want to argue. I didn't want to make a scene. I told myself I could push through. Lily was on the couch with a throw blanket and her phone Scout curled beside her like a pillow with fur. She looked up just long enough to wave. "Hey, Rach, isn't he gorgeous?" She kissed the top of his head and laughed when he tried to lick her face. "He's like a cloud that barks." I stayed in the doorway, keeping as much distance as I could, and said something polite. I don't even remember what it was. My eyes were already starting to water. I excused myself to the bathroom and took another dose of antihistamines, then stood in front of the mirror and counted my breaths. My throat wasn't closing, not yet. I used my inhaler, splashed cold water on my face, and told myself I could last until dessert. Just a couple of hours, just dinner, then I could go home. At the table, the lasagna was as good as I remembered, but I could barely taste it. My nose was too blocked, and my tongue felt thick. The conversation, as usual, revolved around Lily. Scout's training classes, his personality, how smart he was with new commands. They had a whole drawer now just for his grooming tools and a subscription box that delivered toys every month. Every time I tried to steer the conversation towards something else, my job, the new marketing course I was taking, even my apartment, my mother would nod, smile, then turn back to Lily to ask about Scout's sleeping habits. Halfway through dessert, my skin broke out in hives. I wiped at my arms under the table, trying not to scratch, but the itching was deep and sharp. Lily glanced over. "Wow, Rach, you look awful. Is it Scout?" I nodded. "Yeah." I said this might happen. My mother frowned. "I honestly thought you were exaggerating. You've always made a big deal about your health." I didn't answer right away. I couldn't. I felt heat rising in my chest, not just from the reaction, but from something else I couldn't name yet. "It's not exaggeration," I said, my voice flat. "It's a documented condition. I've had it since I was 16. My dad put down his fork. "Well, you ate a full meal, didn't you?" "Can't be that serious." I pushed my chair back and stood. "Thanks for dinner," I said. "But I need to go. I'm not feeling well." My mom looked confused. "But we haven't had coffee yet." "I wanted to show you the new curtains in the living room." I reached for my coat. "Another time." Lily rolled her eyes. You're always so serious, Rachel. It's just a little allergy. Take a Benadryl and relax. I didn't respond. I stepped out into the night air and took a long breath, though it didn't do much. My chest still felt tight. I drove to the nearest pharmacy, bought more antihistamines, and took them in the parking lot. By the time I got home, I was exhausted. I used my nebulizer changed into soft cotton clothes that wouldn't irritate the hives and lay down in the dark. My arms stung, my sinuses throbbed, and my throat was raw from the effort of breathing. Lying there, I tried to convince myself of what I always did, that they didn't mean to hurt me, that Lily needed more attention, that I was the strong one. But something about that night wouldn't sit still. I kept hearing Lily's voice. It's just a little allergy, and my mother's comment about me being dramatic, and my father brushing off the dinner as proof I was fine. I turned over and stared at the ceiling. I had driven 30 miles, taken extra meds, risked a health crisis just to sit through another evening where I was invisible. By morning, the hives hadn't faded. My chest hurt when I breathed too deep, and standing made the room spin. I left a voicemail with my doctor and tried to pull myself together. I had a big presentation that afternoon. I told myself I could manage. I'd done it before. I showered, dressed slowly, and made it to the office with minutes to spare. Natalie, my coworker, saw me before I even reached my desk. "Rachel, you look terrible. What happened?" I managed a laugh. "Allergic reaction. I'll be fine." She didn't look convinced. "You're not fine. You're pale and wheezing. Let me drive you to urgent care." I shook my head. "I've got a meeting. I'll call my doctor after." She hesitated, then nodded. "Okay, but promise you'll follow up." I called again and finally got through to the nurse. After hearing my symptoms, she didn't hesitate. "You need to go to the ER. Now. It sounds like anaphylaxis, and we can't take chances." I sat still for a few seconds, holding the phone in my lap. Then I got up and walked back to Natalie's desk. "The nurse says I should go. Can you let Brian know I'll miss the presentation?" Natalie grabbed her keys. "You're not going alone." On the drive, I called my parents. It went to voicemail. I left a message calm and short, explaining I was going to the hospital. Then I called Lily. She answered on the third ring. "Hey, what's up?" I told her what was happening, that I couldn't get a hold of our parents. "Oh, that sucks," she said, distracted. "Scout's chewing on my shoes again. I'll tell them if I see them." "Lily, I'm serious. I need them to know." Okay, she said. "Feel better, Rach." She hung up. I stared at my phone for a long time. Natalie didn't ask what was wrong. She just turned on her signal and merged onto the freeway. At the ER, everything blurred. Nurses, bright lights, quick questions, the cool burn of an IV in my arm. I heard machines beeping, felt the edge of panic when I couldn't catch my breath. And then nothing. The next few hours blurred into lights' voices and the cold press of IVs in both arms. A nurse gently tapped my shoulder as I drifted in and out, asking questions I couldn't answer fast enough. Another hand pressed against my ribs as someone listened to my breathing. I heard my name once or twice, a woman's voice saying it gently, then again louder. But even the sound of it didn't feel real. I remember coughing sharp and dry, and then something being pushed into my arm. Everything slowed after that. Later, I learned that Natalie stayed until midnight. She'd left only when a nurse assured her I was stable. In those early hours, the hospital called my parents. They finally reached them just after 6. The nurse explained that I had been admitted with a severe reaction and my condition was critical. She said, "We need you to come. It's serious. Her organs are under stress." My dad had paused, then said they couldn't come that night. They had to pick up Lily and Scout from a new dog park. My mom added that they would try to stop by the next day if I was still there. I wasn't awake to hear any of that. But when I finally opened my eyes, I was in a hospital bed, the beeping of machines steady in the background. A nurse with graying hair and kind eyes noticed me stirring and walked over quietly. Her name tag said Ellie. She adjusted my oxygen line and smiled. "You gave us a scare," she said softly, "but you're doing better now." I looked past her toward the chair near the window. Empty. "My parents," I asked, my voice dry and cracking. She hesitated. "They haven't come yet. Would you like me to call them again?" I shook my head. The ceiling above me was bright and smooth and cold. I watched it for a long time without blinking. Ellie didn't press. She just sat for a minute, her hand resting lightly on my wrist. That afternoon, Natalie returned. She brought a scarf I'd left at the office and a card signed by a few coworkers. One of the designers had drawn a tiny cat in the corner. "It looked like mine." "Everyone's been asking about you," she said, setting the card on the table. "Brian said not to worry about the presentation. He rescheduled it. We've got it covered." I asked if anyone had heard from my parents. She hesitated, then nodded. "The ER called them. I was still there for the first call. They didn't come." She didn't say more. She didn't have to. The second night I slipped in and out again. My vitals were still unstable and my lungs weren't fully clearing. The steroids made my hands shake, my throat hurt. At some point I remember calling out, not even sure who I was asking for. I whispered something about my neighbor, Mrs. Garza. She wasn't there, of course, but I must have been scared about my cat. A nurse told me later that I kept saying his name between shallow breaths. By morning, I was stable enough to stay awake for longer stretches. Ellie came back with clean linens and tucked them at the edge of my bed. "Your coworker Natalie's stopping by later," she said, "and a few others from your office." I nodded. She paused before leaving. "You haven't had any family visit?" I said no. She looked at me quiet for a second, then changed the subject. Later, Dr. Rivera, an immunologist, came in and pulled a chair to the side of my bed. She explained what had happened, how my immune system had responded to the dog exposure in a way that triggered not just one wave of symptoms, but a second, more dangerous reaction. "It's called a biphasic anaphylactic response," she said, "because your underlying autoimmune disorder is already active. Your body couldn't regulate the second wave." I asked her plainly, "Could I have died?" She nodded. "Yes, if you hadn't come when you did. This kind of reaction can escalate quickly, especially when it's delayed like this. You were fortunate someone got you here." I asked how long I'd need to stay. She said probably another week, maybe more. Over the next few days, a steady stream of coworkers came through. People I hadn't thought of as close folks I said hello to in the kitchen or traded emails with about budget drafts sat beside my bed and asked if I needed anything. One brought crossword puzzles, another brought homemade cookies. Natalie came each afternoon, always with something useful. She even brought a spare charger when mine stopped working. No one from my family called. By the 5th day, I'd stopped checking my phone. Ellie came in around lunchtime with a strange look on her face. "Your parents called," she said, watching me closely. "They wanted an update. They said they might come by tomorrow around 3. I nodded once. "If they come, I don't want to see them." She nodded back. "I'll let the desk know. You can always change your mind." That night I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about the nurse in the ER who had begged them to come. About my mother saying it was too inconvenient. I kept hearing Lily's voice on the phone, distracted, brushing me off while her dog tore through her living room. I asked Ellie for a notepad and a pen the next morning. She brought me one along with a small lap desk. "Take your time," she said. Over the next few days, I wrote. It started as a list. Things I remembered, times they didn't come. The night of my swim meet, the pneumonia in college, all the birthdays I celebrated alone. Then it became something else. A letter, 4 pages, Neat handwriting, one sentence at a time. When the 7th day came and Dr. Rivera told me I could be discharged that afternoon, I didn't feel finished, but I felt clear. I folded the letter carefully, placed it in an envelope, and sealed it. I asked Ellie to put it on the pillow after I left. "Can you make it look like I left it there for them?" I asked. "Of course," she said. Her voice was quiet. Natalie picked me up that afternoon. She parked around the corner near a coffee shop with a view of the entrance. We sat inside with tea. I watched the doors waiting. At exactly 3:15, I saw my parents walk through the glass doors and pause at the front desk. They didn't look rushed. They didn't look worried. They looked like people visiting a neighbor at a nursing home. I didn't know how they'd react to the letter, but I knew whatever happened next, it wouldn't be the same. The next morning, Ellie called me from the nurse's station. She'd gotten my number before I left, just in case. "I hope I'm not interrupting," she said, her voice warm. "I just thought you might want to know what happened when your parents showed up." I told her I did. She took a breath, then started from the beginning. "They came right on time, 3 o'clock sharp. I met them at the front desk and told them you'd been discharged that morning. Your father looked surprised, maybe even a little annoyed. He asked why no one had called to let them know. I told him the discharge was planned and that you were doing better. Your mom didn't say anything at first. She just headed straight for your room." Ellie paused for a second. She saw the envelope right away. It was sitting on the bed where you asked me to leave it, propped against the pillow. Your name was written across the front in that neat handwriting of yours. She picked it up, stared at it for a few seconds, then called your father over. They opened it together. I imagined the two of them standing there side by side, the letter in their hands, the hospital room empty except for the echo of what had been. "I stepped out," Ellie continued, "but I could see them through the small window in the door. Your dad's face turned red right away. Your mom sat down on the bed halfway through reading. It looked like her legs gave out. They didn't say much to each other, just sat there for a long time." "How long?" I asked. "Almost 45 minutes, she said. "No talking, just sitting." Your dad kept smoothing the letter out and folding it again over and over. Your mom cried quietly the whole time. When they finally left, they didn't speak to the nurse on duty, just walked out. She let a beat pass. "I thought you'd want to know." I thanked her. After we hung up, I sat at the edge of Natalie's spare bed and looked out the window. The street below was quiet, only a few cars moving through the intersection. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel guilty. I just felt still. For the next few days, I focused on rest. Natalie had cleared space in her guest room for my things. She brought home groceries and didn't ask questions unless I wanted to talk. At night, we watched old movies with the windows cracked open. Her apartment was on the top floor with clean air and no pets. I slept better there than I had in years. My body needed time. I was sleeping close to 12 hours a night, sometimes more. The medications Dr. Rivera prescribed came with charts and instructions. Natalie helped keep it all organized. She left sticky notes on the bathroom mirror with reminders, green pill after lunch check. Inhaler call Lydia Tuesday. Lydia was the therapist Dr. Rivera had recommended. I booked a video appointment from Natalie's couch. She had short silver hair and a quiet voice. In our first session, she asked me to tell her what happened. I told her about the dinner, the hospital, the letter. In our third session, she said something that stuck. "This isn't just about being left at the hospital," she said. "What you're describing is a classic golden child scapegoat pattern. Your parents made one daughter their project and the other their proof of independence. They weren't caring less. They were expecting more than was fair." I didn't answer right away. "It's not something you caused," she continued. "It's something they built long ago, and you learn to survive inside it by over-functioning, overachieving, over-accommodating. That kind of survival works until your body or your heart says no more." I sat with that for a long time. Over the next few days, I finished writing out a few things that had come up during our sessions. Not letters, not plans, just pieces of truth I hadn't let myself speak before. 2 weeks after I'd been discharged, I felt strong enough to go home, Mrs. Garza met me at the front door of my building with a warm smile and a mason jar of soup. "I fed your cat every day," she said, unlocking my apartment with the spare key. "He's been splitting his time between our places. I think he thinks he has 2 homes now." The apartment smelled faintly, like my old lavender detergent. My cat blinked at me from the couch and stretched. Mrs. Garza looked around and nodded. "You're lucky," she said. "This place is quiet. You can hear yourself think." Then she handed me a folded note. "Lydia said to call her when you got settled." I thanked her. After she left, I sat on the floor beside my cat and ran my hand along his back. The air was still. The sun reached across the carpet, warm against my legs. That weekend, I changed the emergency contact on my medical forms. I listed Natalie instead of my parents. I added Mrs. Garza as a secondary. I also asked my building manager about installing a lockbox in case paramedics ever needed access again. He said yes without hesitation. On Sunday, I received a text from Lily. "Hey, how are you feeling?" That was it. No mention of the hospital, no mention of the letter. I answered simply, "Recovering, thanks." No follow-up came. 2 days later, I received a voicemail from my mother. "Rachel, this is your mother. We got your letter. I think you're being very dramatic about all of this. Your father and I have always done our best for you. Call us when you're ready to talk." I didn't return the call. Instead, I shared the message with Lydia at our next appointment. She listened without interruption, then said, "This response tells you more about where they are than about who you are." I nodded. "What you decide to do next," she said gently, "is up to you." I wasn't sure yet. But I knew the next decision wouldn't come from guilt. A few days after my mother's voicemail, I received a longer message, this time from my father. It came as an email late in the evening with no subject line. I read it twice before setting it aside. He wrote that my letter had been a lot to take in, and that while he didn't agree with everything I said, he admitted they hadn't always handled things well. He said they thought I was stronger than I let on, and that they'd come to rely on that strength too much. He ended with, "We miss you, Rachel. Maybe we can talk soon." I forwarded the email to Lydia and saved my response for our next session. When we met that Thursday, she read it quietly, then looked up. "This is a common first step," she said. "There's a slight acknowledgement, but no full ownership. That line about being stronger than you let on, that's still putting the responsibility back on you." I nodded. "What would you like to do?" she asked. I thought for a moment, then said I want to respond, briefly. Later that night, I wrote back, "Dad, thank you for your message. I appreciate your acknowledgement that things could have been handled differently. At the moment, I still need time and space to heal both physically and emotionally. I'm not ready for deeper conversation yet. I hope you'll respect that. Rachel." I didn't hear back, but the silence felt different this time, quieter, less uncertain. Meanwhile, something unexpected began happening with Lily. She texted again a few days later. This time she asked how I was sleeping and whether the doctors thought I'd fully recover. Her tone had shifted. It was softer, less distracted. She didn't talk about scout or weekend plans. She just asked questions and waited for answers. One afternoon, about a month after I'd been discharged, she called. "Mom and Dad are acting strange," she said as soon as I answered. "They won't tell me what your letter said, but they've been fighting a lot. And Mom keeps crying in the laundry room." "What did you say to them?" I hesitated. I told them the truth. About how they treated me, about what happened at the hospital. There was a long pause on her end. "They said you were overreacting, that it wasn't as bad as you made it sound." I took a breath. "Lily, the doctor said I might not make it through the night. They told Mom and Dad that. And they didn't come." Her voice was quiet when she finally spoke. I didn't know it was that serious. Would you have done anything differently if you had? I asked. I wasn't trying to trap her. I just wanted to know. She was silent again. I don't know, she said honestly. I guess I've never had to think about it. Everything's always been about what I need. There was a heaviness in her voice that I hadn't heard before. It's not your fault, I said. That's how we were raised, but I can't keep being part of it. It nearly cost me everything. She asked quietly, Are you saying you don't want to be my sister anymore? I paused, choosing my words carefully. I'm saying I need to figure out who I am when I'm not trying to earn our parents' love. That doesn't mean I don't love you. It means I'm starting with me. She didn't argue. She just said, okay. And for the first time, it felt like she was really listening. That night, I wrote in my notebook. I listed out every time I'd brushed off my own pain for the sake of keeping peace. Every time I'd smiled when I wanted to cry. Every time I'd told myself it didn't matter. I didn't write for clarity. I wrote to remember. The following week, I returned to work. My office had prepared a small welcome-back lunch. Nothing formal, just a few people sandwiches and a card they'd all signed. Natalie hugged me and handed me a new inhaler she'd picked up as a backup. I keep extras now, she said, laughing gently. You taught me that? Being back in my routine helped. But I moved slower. I said no more often. I stepped out for air when I needed space. One afternoon, I updated the contacts on my HR forms. I removed both my parents' numbers and added Natalie and Mrs. Garza. Then I made an appointment with my building manager to install a secure lockbox with emergency access. On the second Friday after my return, Lily called again. Do you remember your high school graduation? She asked. You were valedictorian. I forgot about that. I said yes, I remembered. I was sick that day, she continued. Just a cold. But Mom and Dad left right after the ceremony to take me home. I didn't say anything. She kept going. I was thinking about that. And your college graduation, too. They didn't go, did they? I confirmed they hadn't. I had a date that night, she said quietly. Mom helped me pick out an outfit. I didn't realize you were graduating that day. We sat in silence for a few moments. Then she asked, Do you think things can ever be normal between us again? I answered truthfully. Maybe not normal, but maybe something better. Something honest. I didn't know then what direction our relationship would take, but for the first time, it didn't feel one-sided. Later that evening, as I washed dishes, I caught my reflection in the kitchen window. The shadows under my eyes had faded. The rash on my arms had healed. I looked tired, but I also looked present, like someone coming back to herself one piece at a time. 3 weeks after I returned to work, I stepped into the break room and found a familiar voice waiting for me. Lily sat at the corner table, a coffee in one hand and a folder in the other. Her hair was pulled into a neat ponytail, and she looked up as I entered. I emailed Natalie, she said. Told her I wanted to surprise you. I stood still for a moment, unsure what to say. I brought you something, she added, holding up the folder. I finally found it. I walked over and sat across from her. She slid the folder toward me. Inside was a drawing I'd made when I was 10. It was crinkled, faded, but still intact. Stick figures labeled me and Lily holding hands under a sun. At the bottom it said, I'll always protect you. I kept it, she said, even when we moved houses, even when I got mad at you. I traced the edges with my finger. I thought I was protecting you back then, I said quietly, by doing what they asked, by not stirring things up. She looked down. I know. The silence wasn't tense. It was full. I've been thinking, she said, about everything. You were right. They used you as the glue, and I never saw it because I was too busy benefiting from it. I met her eyes. I don't want to be that kind of person, she added. You're not, I said. Not anymore. She stayed for another 20 minutes. We didn't talk about our parents. We just shared lunch, 2 sandwiches, and a couple of memories we hadn't dusted off in years. That evening, I sat on my balcony watching the wind stir the tree branches. I held the drawing in my lap and thought about all the ways love had once looked like sacrifice, like silence, like shrinking. And now it was starting to look like honesty. The next day, I received a certified letter from a law office downtown. Inside was a formal document notarized and signed by both my parents. It stated that they had removed me from all medical and emergency contact forms per my request, and acknowledged that any future contact would be initiated only with my express permission. I sat at my kitchen table, the paper flat in front of me, the notary stamp catching the light. It wasn't an apology, but it was something else. It was space. Later that week, I spoke with Mrs. Garza. She'd dropped by with some banana bread warm from the oven, and we sat by the window with tea. "I saw your sister leave the building the other day," she said. "She looked like she'd been crying, but in a good way." I smiled. "She brought me a drawing I made when I was 10, Mrs." Garza nodded thoughtfully. "You know, she said I once told your mother you were the one who brought Lily to Sunday school every week, rain or shine. She acted like she'd forgotten." I looked out the window. "She probably had," I said. "Maybe," Mrs. Garza replied, "or maybe she just didn't want to remember." That night, I finally opened the voicemail app on my phone. The saved message from the hospital still sat there untouched. I pressed play. "Hi, this is Dr. Brantley from Seattle General. I'm calling regarding your daughter, Rachel Carter. She's been admitted with anaphylaxis. She's stable now, but it was serious. We tried contacting her emergency contacts, but no one answered." The message played on, but I didn't need to hear the rest. I just needed to hear the beginning. The part where it was confirmed real, not imagined, documented. I let the silence sit a while after it ended. Then I deleted it. I didn't need proof anymore. The next morning, I dropped off a stack of donation boxes at a local women's shelter. Some were full of books, others clothes I no longer wore. I included a few of Lily's toys she'd asked me to pass along, dolls' puzzles, even a music box shaped like a carousel. As I signed the receipt, a staff member smiled. "Thank you," she said. "You wouldn't believe how many women leave with just the clothes on their back." I nodded. Actually, I said, "I think I would." That Sunday, I hosted dinner at my place, just Lily, Natalie, and Mrs. Garza. We had soup and salad, a quiet meal with no speeches or toasts, just conversation, laughter, and the clinking of silverware. At the end of the night, Lily lingered behind. "Can I ask you something?" she said. "Of course. When you were in the hospital, were you scared I didn't answer right away?" Then I said I was, but not in the way you'd think. I wasn't scared of dying. I was scared that if I survived, nothing would change. She nodded. "I think it has, though." I reached over and squeezed her hand. "I think so, too." As she left, I stood in the doorway and watched her walk down the hall. She turned once to wave. I waved back. It was late when I went to bed, but I didn't turn on the white noise machine. I left the window cracked, listened to the night sounds, distant traffic, a dog barking, the wind in the leaves. I slept soundly. For the first time in a long time, I didn't wake up waiting for the other shoe to drop. On the second Sunday in May, I woke up early. The house was quiet, but the air felt different, lighter somehow. I made coffee and brought it out to the small table on my balcony. A card sat beside my mug, the envelope pale blue with my name written in Lily's careful handwriting. "Happy Mother's Day," it read on the front. Inside there was a short message. "Thank you for raising me when no one else really did. I love you." I stared at the words until they blurred. I didn't cry. I just held the card for a long time, letting the weight of it settle in. Later that morning, I visited the cemetery for the first time in years. I didn't go to visit anyone in particular, just walk through the rows of names, reading the stones, letting the stillness surround me. There was something about standing in a place so quiet that made the noise of the past feel far away. I passed by a bench and sat down, resting the card in my lap. A little girl nearby placed wildflowers at a headstone, then looked up and waved. I waved back. That afternoon, I got a call from Lily. She was standing outside my apartment building holding a bag from our favorite deli. I buzzed her up. We sat on the couch and ate lunch from paper containers, balancing them on throw pillows like we used to do when she was little. I didn't want to do the whole brunch thing, she said. It felt fake. I nodded. This feels better. She pulled out another card from her bag and handed it to me. This one was handmade with a simple sketch of two women sitting on a bench side by side. I drew this last night, she said. It's us. Older. Still talking. I smiled. I hope so. She leaned her head against my shoulder. I've been talking to someone, she said quietly. A therapist. I wanted to tell you earlier, but I wasn't ready. I'm glad I said. I realized I've been waiting for Mom and Dad to become something they're not, and I think I finally stopped. We sat there a while, the city humming softly through the windows. Later that week, I received a letter from my parents. It wasn't handwritten, just typed, printed, and signed at the bottom in identical blue ink. They said they hoped I was well, that they understood my need for distance, that they were working through some things together and separately. They didn't ask for a response. There was no apology, no acknowledgement of what had happened that night in the hospital. But it wasn't cold, just restrained. I folded it once and placed it in a drawer next to Lily's drawings and a few old photographs I wasn't ready to let go of yet. A few days later, Natalie came by with a clipboard and a bag of groceries. You said you wanted to host that community workshop, she said. I'm holding you to it. I laughed. I did say that. She grinned. Then let's plan it. We sat at the kitchen table with notebooks and pens scribbling down ideas. I suggested a session on caregiving and burnout. Natalie added one on boundaries and guilt. I think a lot of people need this, she said. I nodded. I know I did. By mid-June, flyers had gone up around the neighborhood. The community center offered us a small meeting room with mismatched chairs and a whiteboard that barely erased. But people came. The first session, 12 women showed up. One brought homemade cookies. Another brought her teenage daughter. We shared stories, not just about family, but about identity, shame, resilience. Afterward, Natalie turned to me and said, "You're a natural at this." I smiled. It feels like I'm telling the truth for the first time. The next week, 17 people showed up, and the week after that, 23. Somewhere between those sessions, Lily joined us, not to speak, just to listen. She sat quietly, hands folded in her lap, and afterward gave me a small nod before heading out. On the last day of the workshop series, a woman stood at the front and said, I came here thinking I was broken, but I think I was just tired of being the only one holding everything up. Everyone nodded. As we packed up, Natalie said, You know this could be something more. I know I said. I think it already is. That evening, Lily sent me a photo. It was a selfie, her and her girlfriend Amy standing in front of a food truck with bright yellow lights. She said yes, the caption read. I texted back, Congratulations, I'm so proud of you. And I meant every word. The following morning, I opened my window and breathed in the summer air. It smelled like honeysuckle and warm concrete. I didn't know what would come next. But for the first time, I wasn't afraid of it. A few weeks later, Lily invited me over for dinner. It was a simple meal, roast chicken, mashed potatoes, green beans, but the table was set with care. She had even placed a small vase of daisies in the center. Amy greeted me at the door, warm and easy, like I'd always been part of their lives. We ate slowly, talking about nothing urgent. At one point, Lily leaned back and said, I've been thinking about the wedding. I'd like you to walk me down the aisle. I set my fork down. Are you sure? She nodded. You've been the one who's actually been there for me. It feels right." I didn't have an answer at first. I just reached for her hand, and she didn't let go. When the night ended, I walked home under a sky full of stars. For once, I didn't feel the need to look over my shoulder for old shadows. In the weeks that followed, the workshops Natalie and I started kept growing. People from other neighborhoods came. Some asked if we'd thought about turning it into something more formal. I wasn't sure yet, but the thought stayed with me. One afternoon, I found the letter from my parents again while cleaning out a drawer. I read it once more, and then, without ceremony, I placed it in a small box with a few keepsakes. I realized I didn't need an answer from them to move forward. By the time autumn came, I had a steady rhythm community work time with Lily and Amy, quiet evenings at home. The noise that had once filled my life was gone, replaced by something calmer, steadier. The day Lily and Amy set their date, she called me first. I stood at the kitchen counter listening to her excitement spill through the phone and felt something I hadn't in a long time: peace. I've learned that family is not always the one you're born into. Sometimes it's the people who choose to stay even when it's hard, the people who show up without being asked. If you've ever had to step away from those who should have cared for you, I hope you know this. You are still worthy of love, respect, and joy. And it's never too late to build a life where those things are part of every day. Thank you for staying with me through this story. I hope it stays with you too.